Hello, everybody. Once again, we are at Guitar Journeys and we are at episode 3. And I have a very special guest with me today. It is Brandon Dyke. And I pose the same 5 questions to each person that comes on the show, on the podcast. And gives a chance to you can see yourself in someone else's story and also the chance for community building. And so there's 2 good aspects to this Guitar Journeys scene that we're putting forward here. And without further ado, I'll introduce Brandon Dyke.
Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it, Rob, for having me. This is awesome.
I thank you so much for being here. And I've been wanting to do this episode for a while, so I'm really, really excited
Yeah,
for it.
man.
And I think what you have to offer is going to be amazing. And
Thank you.
it's been a good run with people's backstories so far. So I think again, this is another opportunity for you to see yourself in somebody else's backstory, right from the beginnings up to the current day. So without further ado, let's jump into the first question of 5. So number
Very
1,
nice.
to you, Brandon, I ask, how did you become interested in guitar?
Well, that's a long story, but it's also a short story. So here it is. Well, I came from a musical family. My dad was a singer-songwriter and used to sing to us and everything like that. My brother and I, growing up in Florida, um, Seminole, Florida, in the Tampa Bay area. Um, my mom was also a piano player and she played the flute occasionally. So we had a lot of music in our life, even at an early age and stuff. And so just having those fond musical memories. When I was 10 years old, I started to skateboard, which I know we're talking about guitar, but the reason why that's important is because during that time, I really started to develop the love of guitar just by watching my dad being a little bit older. And so my parents said, if you make honor roll on your report card, we'll go ahead and we'll give you a guitar. So I made honor roll, probably the only time I made honor roll. And so my parents bought me my first guitar. It was a Bentley. You might remember that brand.
Hmm.
The action was super high off the neck. It was insane. Um, so I started off, this will probably be, I was 13 when I started playing. And so after making on roll, I just played guitar for a few months. And then I know your second question, I could go into that, or if you want to ask it, that's fine too. But I did start taking lessons. So if you want to elaborate on the question, we can do that. Or if you want me to just keep going, I can do that as well. So
Yeah, I mean it's funny
whatever you would
because
want.
it's a interesting approach where usually what I do is I furnish the questions ahead of time, which is great because people get a chance to kind of formulate. I know even for myself
Exactly.
doing my own episode, it was bit of formulation. So yeah, absolutely, I can ask you the second question. It's a good lead in because it's really we're at the origin of the story.
Nice.
So are you self taught or did you
Correct.
take lessons? That's question number 2.
Gotcha. I definitely took lessons, but I always tell my students, you're also going to be self-taught because you're going to be your own teacher as well, right? So, but for me, when I did start taking lessons, I got the guitar. I started taking lessons at a music store, and my very first guitar instructor, he got me into the Beatles right away and some Tom Petty, and then he handed me an album called Moving Pictures by a band called Rush. And that was just life changing, really, for starting to play and early on getting an amazing album to be inspired by. So he let me borrow the tape, Moving Pictures on tape. I went home and I just played it, and it was just amazing. And I was like, I came back and he had shared a lot of things with me, information about the band, and there's only 3 members and they're from Canada and all that kind of stuff. And it was cool. So shortly after, he let me hear Rush, and I started to play Tom Sawyer was the first song that he taught me, and so unfortunately he ended up having to leave the music store, and I ended up taking lessons with another awesome teacher, and I still keep in touch with him today. His name is Steve Petrie,
Hmm.
an amazing rock jazz fusion player. I mean, he could play anything. He taught me, um, in addition to bringing in a Rush tape every single week, he taught me some classical guitar pieces. At the time in high school, I was in AP Music Theory, and I took it as an elective like every single year, and so I was big into music theory, and I was learning the fretboard and learning how to apply scales and stuff like that. And he was giving me classical guitar pieces, and he would take the score and then he would staple a tab on the notation as well, just so I had both. And I found that to be really good because I could read the notes. I wasn't good at finding it on the fretboard right away, right? So
Mhm.
he was really good about doing that for me. And so I would come back and he would give me pointers on the fingerings, and um, it was nice too because I had the notation. So usually with guitar, if you have notation, you have the little numbers right next to the notes that will tell you the left hand fingering, right?
Mhm.
So that was really helpful. And at the time, I really didn't get like into nails and stuff like that yet, but it was more a really great development period. So at the time, during that time when I was taking with him, high school, I've played in some bands and stuff like that, and mostly original music.
Okay.
So I used a lot of the music theory to come up with chord progressions for my own music and stuff. And um, that was just great, just to be able to have that outlet. Um, so pretty much after my music store days, I essentially started taking with the college professor at St. Pete Junior College, and his name was Joe Braccio,
Okay.
um, and just a phenomenal jazz and classical player. He studied over in Italy at a
Oh wow.
conservatory with Ilario Diaz,
Oh sure.
in addition to Adam Holzman, the
Mhm.
Bruce Holzman from FSU.
Okay.
Um, God rest his soul. Uh, taught my teacher Joe. So basically, I went in and uh, I thought I was going to probably be like one of the best students or whatever. And it was so funny. Joe at the time he was teaching at uh, Gibbs High School in Florida, and he had a guitar program established even for high school kids. So when I came into junior college there, he was he had players that had been there for like 4 years already. So they were playing Bach pieces and Villa-Lobos etudes and preludes and stuff. And so they were really, it was good to have that level of like, you're gonna have to do this. So when I came in to audition for Joe, I played a Scarlatti sonata in E minor for him that Steve had taught me. And he's like, he's such a cool guy because he would call us all meatballs because he's like Italian.
Yeah.
And he was just so fun. And so um, he would say, "All right, meatball, let's see your scales or let's see what you're working on." Um, and he's a trip. And so it was really good. The first time I met with him, he was like, "So, how did you learn that? Where'd you learn that?" And I told him I learned it from Steve and at the music store. And he was, "Oh, I know Steve."
Oh.
And so that was great. And then I was like, "Okay, this is going great." And then he goes, "Well, it's all wrong." I'm like, you know, and he won't mind me saying this because it ends up great. But he basically said, "You've got a lot of talent, but you're like Shaquille O'Neal. You haven't been taught how to shoot free throws." I was like,
Oh
"Oh,
wow.
yeah, it was crazy."
Uh,
So, but what was really good is it really kind of put me in a place where I knew I was in the right spot, that I was going to learn a lot, and that was a great experience. And so later on after that, I took with other teachers at TFC in Georgia, Toccoa, Georgia, and both of my instructors there were from UGA. They had one had his PhD in composition, and the other was just an amazing composition, kind of like an Andrew York type of style with his original compositions. But you learn so many different things from all your teachers,
Mm.
and I think for me at that point, it was good having different teachers too, and being able to learn different things from them. So with Joe, I did get a lot more jazz as well. Um, and so that was a really great period because he kind of taught me how to break things down where it was always about the right note at the right time.
Mm.
Memorize arpeggios, memorize extensions to those arpeggios, memorize scale spellings, be able to come up with it quickly, play the jazz melody in every position of the guitar. We would do that. We'd come back and, you know, talk about, he'd be like, all right, next week you're going to be at the gig. And,
Oh,
yeah. And he would be like, hey, like you're going to play all the parts. You got to comp the chords, you got to know the melody, and you got to take a solo. So you
nice.
better study,
Yeah.
So I would be like at Denny's at night with like my fretboard charts and like season fries, and all the cool kids are walking in. Hey, Brandon, like
Right.
so I was that guy. But yeah, just to go back a little bit to Joe, just because of the jazz thing.
Mhm.
When I moved to Greenville, South Carolina, which is where I live now, um, that was 2003, and I met a very cool guy named Shawn Allen, and him and
Hmm.
he was another guitar instructor, classical background, and he also liked Rush as well, which is cool. So him and I joined a guitar duo called Spatha, and our mission statement was kind of like, let's take classical guitar and bring it to different places like bar and grills. And we played concert halls as well.
Mm.
It's hard not to if you're a guitar duo, but
Right.
for the most part, that was our mission. We would do like, a Star Wars suite, and then we would go into like Dominiconi, or all of the Bach conventions and stuff like
Hmm.
that. It was just so much fun. And we also wrote our own compositions too, but I consider him to be one of my teachers because he really did push us hard. And we're still good friends to this day, and he is just a phenomenal guitarist all around. Um, so yeah, look up Shawn Allen. But basically getting into uh getting into the question of being self-taught and taking lessons. Um, Generally, when I teach guitar, I teach at a cultural center here in um, a little town called Mauldin. It's like right outside of Greenville at the
Okay.
Mauldin Cultural Center. So, what's really neat is all the background really helps you out with having a diverse um, a, ability of styles that you can teach people, and that has really, looking back, has been really exciting
Mm.
to be able to, if someone comes in and wants a certain style, I can teach it to them, and I
Yeah.
think that sometimes I don't enjoy everything, but sometimes you have to like, if you have a bluegrass student, they come in, Tony Rice, or whatever.
Yeah, we go
But
tos.
like, so just having that excitement of every style kind of brings you to that place where you can kind of see why you had so many teachers. One of my current teachers, he's a good friend. His name is Rodrigo Rodriguez. He's from Ecuador,
Hmm.
and he's an amazing classical guitarist. And I started working for him just to score his arrangements, and we became good friends and stuff. And he travels the world and plays. And so when I was playing a Villalobos piece for him, he had said, that sounds great. He goes, let me show you how they would play it in Brazil, and gave me sort of like the back feel on it, which was
Yeah.
awesome. So I I I definitely have been very thankful that I've had a lot of guitar players that and teachers, formal teachers, that were a good influence. Um, but creatively, you learn so much from yourself by creating music too.
Mhm.
And so for me, I find that that's a huge thing when it comes to getting into where you want to head with guitar.
Yeah.
So I think that's just, hopefully that's probably a lot of information, but a good way to say, you know, um, I was taught, but I also had to be self-taught as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting. You find yourself at a certain point in your playing, and then um, sometimes you just naturally gravitate to a direction where the right person's there at the right moment,
yep,
and then you link
yep,
together, and it's like, okay, this person's going to bring me
that's
this
right.
extra distance that I'm looking to do, and that's really amazing, actually.
Yeah,
That it seems that the backstory you have is like you're these connections that just sort of compile. They
yeah,
just connect, one after the other in a very organic, natural way. It seems, which is great. I mean, it even having that
that's true.
perspective of a person from with the Villalobos and getting that extra little. Well, it is this style, and this is how they would approach, and that makes it even more authentic and even
Yeah,
more of like what the composer
right.
intended. So it's like constant learning cycle that
Correct.
which is great that you got to experience some of that. And that's really
Yeah,
the nature of the
totally.
beast. The guitar is that way, where it's like you never
Yep.
really get the full grip on it. There's always something elusive to get your hands on, and
Mhm.
that's the exciting part about this nutty instrument we chose to play, is that you have
Exactly.
all these different directions you can go in, or you just stay on a direction and you gather this. Okay, I have this part now. Now you go and you play it, and
Yeah.
then you realize, oh, okay, this is another thing I want to pursue, and then you find that element, and you're like that natural finder of people that can connect you to these
Yeah.
resources you're seeking out, which is amazing.
I agree. I agree 100%. Just, yeah, that's why it's all about the people.
Hmm.
Like in the end, it's that music, it's that common thing, that language that, you know, we all can have to sort of reach each other to uplift us in this crazy world.
Yeah, yeah,
So, yeah.
which is great that you're here, because it's we need that sort of continual lift, and the instrument itself, it's one of these things I covered in the previous episode, where we have what we deal with each day, things come into our realm that we have to deal with, and the guitar is just that just natural outlet that we have, that's a healthy outlet that allows us to express,
Yep.
allows us to create, all these good things that sometimes it can get lost, with all the nuttiness that goes on. But once you're playing the instrument, and I've been finding this
Mm,
with everybody so far that I've spoken to, when you start playing your instrument, you just all
yeah,
that just goes disappears, and you're in your thing. This is your time. You're doing your thing. You're creating
that's
music,
right.
and practicing isn't really practicing. It's like you're playing. You're making sounds from your instrument, and you're doing it. You're creating everything you're hearing. Even
Yep.
if you're recreating something, you're the one doing it. So that's the thing that
Right.
sometimes it's hard to have those healthy natural outlets, and guitar is one of those healthy outlets that
Yes.
is important to remember, that because it can be something that's easily forgettable, if we're not careful.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if it's a job. I mean, sometimes you have to, you know, you got to separate that sort of job mentality versus like the love. And the two go hand in hand if you have the right balance.
Yep. And it
But
seems like you found teachers that have that, where they are teaching
yeah.
you, and it is a job, but it's
Yeah.
also, you have somebody in front of you that wants to gather. They're there, they're motivated to pick up something and learn something. And then as a teacher, and you recognize that in a student, it just creates, it's not work anymore. It's like, now you're like, okay, this is what I want,
Absolutely.
from a player that's a
Yeah.
potential player. They want to be there and get what you have. And that's the thing too, that
That's right.
in previous iterations of guitar journeys, is that I even spoke of it too, where it's all about the person in front of you. Who do you have in front of you? What do they want to get?
Right.
And you being able to offer that, at the Mauldin Center. And I've seen, the
Yeah.
site, the Mauldin Center. I haven't been to it physically, but I've seen it online. It's
Right.
an amazing looking space. The
We'll
performance
have you in, man.
stage,
We'll have you come down.
it's really gorgeous, and I think they renovated it too, right? Wasn't like a recent renovation to that building?
Yeah, they've done a whole new performance hall there, and And then in the back, outside, there's an amphitheater with a bunch of levels, and they do food trucks and everything. So I definitely, eventually, I'd love to have a guitar orchestra, but not just classicals, but like electric, steel string, my gypsy, whatever, like have a big 40 of different instruments, even if the electrics are playing like swells and
Mhm.
maybe some power chords or whatever, or even melodies. But I always thought that would be cool to just sort of not isolate any one guitar and just bring them in, in
Yeah.
a more kind of like orchestral way. Be kind of fun.
Yeah, it's and also I'll include all the information we're talking about, everybody. I'll include all that in the description below. I'll include the Mauldin Center, Shawn Allen, all these different people you're mentioning will be in the description below this video. So
Yeah.
you can research this stuff on your own as well and check it out. So that's always something I include in these episodes is the extra resources that everybody that comes on offers. You'll be able to go to these different sites, check everything out, including the Mauldin Center. So yeah, and you have also your YouTube channel, which I'll include as well in
Yes.
everything we're talking about. It's going to be below. Long story long. So, and even what you just mentioned, yep, right on below. What you also mentioned too about the potential of doing a guitar concert, with
Yeah.
different styles of music leads
Right.
perfectly into question number three, which is
Yes,
what is your
exactly.
favorite guitar style and or genre?
Yeah. This one for me now, I'm going to have to go more recent in my life, and that's got to be progressive rock, just because I think progressive rock to me encompasses rock, of course, but like classical influences and jazz. And I think a lot of times, because sometimes it's hard being on um, if I never really truly wanted to give myself to one political guitar style, if that makes
Right?
sense. So it's like,
Yeah.
I would start to see, oh, that's a closed-minded situation right there. I think I might just take what I want from classical guitar and not go down that way of thinking per se. But and then jazz is the same way, and so uh I think in my life now, I want an audience that's going to be happy. Like I remember playing some concerts, and I worked my tail off with Barrios and Bill Lobos and some of my own compositions. And it's always tough when there's people that if you if you're playing solo guitar, sometimes unless you're Tommy Emmanuel and you have all that enthusiasm and you're, doing all that.
Right.
That's why everybody on the internet now hits their guitar. I'm convinced. I'm kidding, but being
Yeah.
able to look out into an audience and see people bobbing their heads and move into the music, I think rock music in general invites a wide audience, and so progressive rock for me is sort of the direction now
Mm.
where I don't want to over define it, because I've heard people say like, "Oh my gosh, like you sound like Phil Collins, or you sound like Peter Gabriel, or you sound like Cat Stevens meets Yes," or so. I have no idea. I mean, and so um, you can't really try to over describe it, but I would say that's the style or genre that I like, because you can play guitar players in progressive rock music. I mean, I love the space in between phrases. Don't get me wrong. I love playing on people's records and being able to like talk to the producer, talk to the engineer, talk to the artist, and be like, what are you guys looking for? I want to give you what you want. It's not about me playing a bunch of licks on your record. So there's that balance there that I
Mm-hmm.
know to be true. But I think in general, it just allows freedom. I think where even the listeners are like, oh, that was really cool. They brought this little classical part in, and then now they're just building it up like a huge rock crescendo or whatever it may be. And um, there's always back and forth. I'm a songwriter too, so it's like, do I want do I want this song to have vocals, or do I just want to make it an instrumental piece? And recently, I've had the honor, of course, of working with Danny Peart, Neil Peart's brother. He does poetry, and I've been able to, play live with him twice in St. Catharines and Port Dalhousie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And that's been great because I can use all those styles to connect with music in between his poems. And it's really cool to have that paired together where it's he'll have a concept from the poem and I'll do a short 30-second little clip and it's live. And then it's like he'll say another poem. And it's just really, really great to sort of put those two things together, poetry and guitar. It just works hand in hand. So having that project that's recent, my original music, which on my original music, I do record it and mix it, and then I send it to Andy Van Dett in New York, and he masters it. He's been really cool about, working me in whenever he can. And uh, so like, with my recordings, there's obviously a band in there. So I don't have a band. I don't have a band yet. So the other versions of my songs are me with the guitar and some pedals and stuff and doing my music that way, my originals that way as well. I try to always be able to scale a song down. And that kind of got me into doing the Rush thing, where I'll do Rush interpretations. I'll call them interpretations because it's much easier on most people's psyche, I think.
Mhm.
But being able to have to change a key of a Rush song. If you know the music theory, you can change the key, and then maybe there's an arpeggio part that you just have to flip one note around, and then there it is. It's subdivision. It's a 6/4 part, right? Same idea, but you flipped one note of the triad around just to make it work for you.
Mhm.
And most people appreciate it. But I'm the same way. No drums, yeah, I can't go there. But
Right.
but I think Rush fans, the reason why I sort of reached out to them is because they're so, one, loyal, but then two, they get excited about the type of music that I want to write. And it's an all-win situation for everybody, hopefully. So just being in that mindset now, um, uh, it's variety. I can do a solo guitar thing if I want to. I can do my songs. I can do festivals. Like I would do Rush Camp in Pennsylvania, in the Pocono Mountains, since 2017, and they haven't had it in a while just because of the pandemic and everything. But
Right.
that was a great experience just to be able to work up not only Rush medleys, but to work up full Rush songs, like one even stuff they've never played live, The Available Light, right? Like that
Right.
song, um, I I worked up a version that was a whole step down, and I I had already learned Alex's solo, and so I just transposed it down a whole step, and then
Right.
figured out some cool open voicings.
Right.
And yeah, I loved performing that song. It was really cool. And um, I I did use a loop station and stuff to sort of augment, so then you can solo.
Yes.
But sometimes I'll be like, well, maybe I'll just do this subdivisions part with hybrid picking instead of the loopy thing. That way it's fresh, it's something different. So
Mhm.
now you can take that synthesizer part and you're doing it with the pick and M and A on the other parts. So
Right.
and then that version of my version of subdivisions is a whole step down. um so I mean, it's a very personal way to take a Rush song and sort of highlight it or interpret it. And it's been really, really fun to do that. I have to say this though. The only thing that's tough is when you're in a Rush tribute band, you get to rehearse every week and then you go do a gig, it goes well, guess what? You can go do the same set at another gig. Typically with me, it was like work it up, and then I would drive back to South Carolina and it's like I can't play Rush anywhere here. And it was like so hard to be like, I spent so much time like working up this set, and then I can't play the set ever again until and I'm not going to play the same set every year at a music festival.
Right, right.
But so there's some pros and cons to doing what I do, but I just love it, and it's for me, I just think it's something that really just like I had to do it. Have you heard that expression? Like sometimes it's like, you know what, where you're an artist because you have to do it. I
Yes.
just I love that. It's like you have so much passion for it that no matter what. So yeah,
Yeah.
and again, like, it's getting in front of people and then you meet people and there's a connection there and good conversation and you figure out what's going on in their lives and help lift them up sometimes just by
Mhm.
being there. I mean, for me, that's what it's all about, really, is connecting with people, having that experience. And it's more about, I would say, um because sometimes in this music world, this music business, you don't really have a set way to say that something's going to work. you
Mhm.
know there's some attributes that you can look at and you can look around and you can see what other people are doing, and sometimes that works for them
Mhm.
because of what you just said a while back. And so being true to yourself is the biggest thing that I love about the progressive rock audience, is they love people that are true to themselves and they do what they want, and they experiment with stuff. And so I think it just leaves you open to be able to do a lot of different things in your career. And so I'm never bored. There's no way. I mean, I'm even teaching kids how to play Happy Birthday, and I'm totally cool with it. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah, yeah.
it's just so much fun. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
pretty wild, and like a lot of this the stuff you just mentioned is on your YouTube
uh,
channel. So that's
yeah,
gonna be down below as well in the description.
yeah. You can watch a lot of that stuff.
A lot of stuff
I
there.
think it was, yeah. So I think it was R40 when I got on Instagram. I think it was 2014, like the last part of it. So if you remember, the R40 tour was like 2015.
Mhm.
Um, and that's when I got on Instagram, and I just started doing this thing one day because it back then, dude, it was like 15-second clips.
Mhm.
That's all you could do.
Yep. Yeah.
So I would take just a Rush riff, and then I started calling it, you know, R40 Rush celebrations, right?
Mhm.
And then I just started meeting Rush fans. Like I mean, I just follow. I went to Rush's site and just found people,
Yeah.
and I'm following like 7,500 people, right? Like so, I'm like, surely the algorithm will be in my favor, but having that was eye opening because it I had people message me and say, you know what, I was so glad you played that riff today, and I'm like, really? Like, it's like, yeah, because like I love that song, and my boss was yelling at me, and I was in a bad mood, and I'm like, as soon as I heard Red Barchetta, I was just like, all right, everything's fine, like, and that's the way Rush fans are.
Yeah.
And
You
so
find if you play
that's
some of their
kind of
stuff.
how it started. Yeah, like it kind of started, at least putting myself out there in that way with Rush songs and things. Um, and then it was wild how that worked. And I think eventually you just like you said, you meet the right people. That summer, I I had my first Rush solo tribute show, and um I went up to Newark, and my friend Mike has a house there, and he invited me up as a surprise to Lance Caston, who's in Overtime Angels charity.
Right.
Um, Great guy. They call him the Shred. He's awesome. But yeah, so I went up and did my thing, and they were like, what's going on? And so we kind of surprised everybody that I was going to actually play, and it was just such a great time because we had my concert, and then the night after we had Rush in Newark, and we all took the train
Oh, that's cool.
into town, and and got to see Losing It, right? That was when they
Oh,
did Losing
yeah,
It. And at
right.
the time, it wasn't Ben playing the violin, it was John
Yep,
doing
English.
it. So, um, Dinklage, yeah, it was phenomenal. And then I'm in the ninth row with Lance, and I'm just like right in front of Neil's kit, just like boom.
Wow.
I look two rows back, and there's Andy Van Depp, my mastering engineer, and I go talk to him,
That's
and
fun.
I met him in person for the first time, and so it's just it's story after story of just connections and stuff like that that makes you keep going. I mean that I know I'm kind of expanding our answer, but I think that's why I would say progressive rock because it kind of led me into that, which is kind of like if I want to be like Eric Johnson and come out and play a set of solo acoustic stuff and then do a band thing, or I could potentially do that,
Hmm.
and the audience would appreciate it. I think that's they just love music and they love music that maybe it's not just talking about losing your truck and your dog and your wife. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but
Yeah,
so
yeah. It's a different kind of storytelling.
exactly,
With prog and bands that way. And
yeah,
it's the Rush thing is a whole other ball, and
yeah,
their storytelling is different depending
uh-huh.
on which album and period you
Yes,
check out. But it's you learning something even from that. If you're playing prog and you're
uh-huh.
invested in that style, there's
Right,
stuff to latch onto, whether it's emotional or it's in the lyrics or all of it. I mean, it's that's the style I prefer as well. That's what I like.
uh-huh.
And that's kind of what got me into classical guitar as well is Alex Lifeson, hearing Exit Stage Left for the first time,
Absolutely,
hearing, Bruins Bane, Into the
yes,
Trees, and then went to the metal scene with Randy Rhoads, and it just you start to see this tree start to get leaves on it, and you're discovering all this
right,
stuff. And with prog, it's that way too, where you're not only is your ear being
yep,
brought around into different locations and timbres and whatnot, but you
uh-huh,
start discovering other music that you wouldn't normally
yep,
associate yourself listening to. I mean, I got into Kiss when I
right,
was a kid, and like I was playing saxophone.
nice,
I'm like, I can't play Love Gun on saxophone. It sounds stupid. So then I discovered Rush from just that time period. I was ready to hear it, and Moving Pictures came out,
oh,
and
that's
I'm
awesome,
like, and then you learn later on they toured together and they had a blast, as a supporting
yeah,
act to Kiss, and then them learning, what they saw, what the guys at Kiss were doing, the work ethic and everything else. People know all
uh-huh.
this stuff. If you're a big Rush fan, you know all the stuff about Kiss. But that was something too. It was very. When I heard Peter
Yep,
Chris's drum solo, I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I heard Neil on Exit
yeah,
Stage Left. I'm like, oh, forget that, man. It's like nothing against Peter. He's amazing. But it's a
of
whole other
course,
world that opens up to you,
it's
like,
a
oh,
different thing, yep,
more to drumming than just what I thought was, what I really enjoyed. I enjoyed something else, and it just continued to move forward.
hmm,
So yeah, I definitely sympathize with you on the prog scene, and it
yeah,
just gives you that ability to explore those styles, like explore jazz,
that's
explore
right,
classical,
that's
explore
right,
pop. If you want to throw a pop
uh-huh.
influence in there, you can. It's like you're progressing to different styles if you so choose to do
Exact,
that.
exactly,
And if you
right.
play long
I
enough, as most people who are kind of watching this, episode of Guitar Journeys, you start
Yeah,
to realize there's so much to get
it's
your fingers
vast.
on top of, and it just never really
Mhm.
ends. And that's the exciting part about this instrument, and the fact that you can play these different styles. You can play
Yep,
prog, you can play country, et cetera, et cetera. It's really that's the
yep,
exciting part of this whole thing is hearing your
absolutely.
story and what you're into in terms of genres, because I'm sure it'll change,
It
as these
does.
these episodes move forward. But it's good to kind
Oh
of
yeah.
hear the backstory of like why and how you arrived, which is
Uh-huh.
fantastic. So
Well, I appreciate that, Rob. Yeah, that I think you're dead on, and it just it kind of keeps going when you mention, even Randy Rhoads you were talking about, and he was heavily influenced by classical music.
mhm.
When he even before Ozzy, right? Like so,
Yeah.
it was tragic what happened, of course, but
Mhm.
you know, I don't think any guitarist that has heard Ozzy um, never looked at Randy Rhoads playing. I mean, and of course I love Zach Wild too. They're just different. They're different players, but um, that but having that classical influence that kind of pushes into that rock flavor, I think that's a skill to be able to take that and then make a commercially successful rock song. Like
Right.
that's, you know what I mean? Like that's pretty good.
Yeah. It's a
And
really,
I guess Ozzy let him put that stuff in there, just,
yeah.
make sure I can bite my bat, or
Right.
whatever. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Just leave me a moment for me to do that, and then come in with this beautiful, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
sonata, or something.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
Right.
Just give
Yeah.
just the exposition, just that part. Don't do the development and everything else after that. So there's no time for the
Yeah.
recapitulation. Just skip that recapitulation part. Don't worry about
Recapitulation. Yeah.
it.
We'll go
Yeah,
through all of the
yeah.
fugue stuff. I love it,
Right.
man.
You know.
That's awesome. Throw a Neapolitan six chord in there.
Right. Yeah. Some. Yeah.
So
Absolutely. It's just too funny. But yeah, it's an amazing style for sure. And as players, and your goals of sort of moving into different styles could be a goal of yours. So I figured I'd ask
yep.
you. Question number 4 is: have you
Yes.
realized your goals on the guitar? I think I know the answer from what you've been discussing so far. So I'll let you
Well,
go
yeah,
first.
I I definitely know that. I think you said it best a couple minutes ago. It's endless. I mean, the guitar is like a sea of possibility, and of course there's land out there too. But like,
Mm.
um, I think right now, I think what I love is I know that with theory and the fretboard knowledge that you and I got from classical guitar, it's you're able to play over any chord at any time. And I always um, teach my students if they're playing jazz, I was like, okay, this is going to sound harsh, but I want you to solo through the changes on the first string. You can't use any other strings. And I'm like, if you're playing over D7 with a flat nine, F sharp on the second fret, right? A on the fifth fret,
Mm.
C on the eighth fret, D on the 10th fret. Your flat nine is on fret 11. You can do it, right? Now take that same thing to the second string, right? C on the first fret, D on the third fret, the flat nines on the fourth fret.
Mm.
All of those notes are right there. And so I love taking gypsy jazz arpeggios as one of the things that I love to do is two note per string, 3-octave arpeggios. It's like my favorite thing ever to do. And all you're doing is you're spelling a seventh chord with 4 notes, and you're just putting 2 notes on each string. And what works out really nicely is when you do that, it's the same fingering for all 3 octaves. So if you're doing G major 7 from the second fret, right, sixth string, you go F sharp to G, on the sixth string,
Mm.
second fret to third fret. Then you go B to D on the A string,
Right.
and that's second fret to fifth fret.
Mm.
Then if you look at it, take that up an octave. Now you're on the fourth string, fourth fret and fifth fret for the F sharp and the G. It's the same fingering. Then on the third string, you have that B,
Mm.
and you go up to the seventh fret D. It's the same shape, and it works that way for all 3 octaves. I love those things, and I got those really from Django, from Gypsy Jazz approach, because I'm sure you know the story. His caravan caught on fire, and these two fingers were fused together, right?
Yep.
So he had to do all that kind of stuff with just 2 fingers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, he could do some other stuff with those two kind of, I say glued together. That sounds terrible, but that approach is something that I like a lot because it teaches here's the chord tones in that octave
Mm.
of the of any of the seventh chords that you're working for, and eventually the shapes do repeat themselves once
Right.
you really play through them. I'll have to send you a few of those just to have fun with it. You'll love it if you haven't done that yet. It's a trick that I didn't really I don't think I learned that necessarily from a teacher. I think I did that on some self discovery. What do I want to do next type of stuff.
Right.
But I think overall having that basis, when you're in a key where you can add in the open strings,
Mm-hmm.
now you have triplets. And there's a cover of Mission that I did. Um, uh, Gosh, I think that was 2014, if I remember right. And I did that in the end of Mission. I kind of did my own theme and variations.
Yeah.
There's a video on YouTube you can watch where it shows me playing it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I literally just wanted to emulate Neil's triplets on the drums. So
Right.
I did the 2 notes per string, but added the open string in there, hammer-ons.
Right.
And you could go 3 octaves with that open string in there. And it's just kind of something different
Mm-hmm.
that you might not hear, you know, a blues player play.
Yeah. Exactly.
So just
Yeah. That's.
so fun to be able to have, and it's like sometimes you get into that and you're like, whoa, like I think for me that I've always been wanting to, be kind of careful about how much I do transcribe from certain players. I mean, obviously Rush, when I play an Alex solo, I don't even use a whammy bar. So you
Yeah.
can see people on my YouTube say like, that's wrong because you're not using but
Where's
I'm
the
like,
whammy?
listen to the vibrato though. That's pretty good, right? I got it pretty close with my fingers.
Yeah.
So I don't really discredit that, but um for me, I don't spend a lot of time transcribing solos as much as maybe I should. But in one sense, it's brought me to the just have your way, play the right thing at the right time,
Mm-hmm.
know what you're playing over. If it's a group of chords, make sure you can put that into a scale, into a key. If you can't do that, then use your ear as much as you can. If you at least know that that scale pattern works, then just keep using your ear.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with using your ear. But if you always have to hit a bunch of wrong frets before you find the right number of frets, and you're thinking, okay, 4, 1, instead of note names,
Mm-hmm.
something you're going to be stuck. There's going to be a rut waiting to happen. So I've always used the fretboard in theory to try to increase the imagination
Mm-hmm.
before I change the tuning of my guitar. But what's kind of funny about to say is, like, I feel like now I want to explore more and do what most people did before, what I'm talking about. And that would be like, let's do more alternate tunings, or let's do, what those cut capos where they have
Yes.
capos on a couple strings at a time.
Right.
I mean, it's like you said, it's endless.
Yeah.
So if I'm writing something, it's not always just music theory. It's got to be a groove. It's got to be a feel. There's rhythm there. There's technique there. It's not, you can't just have music theory without the application and without the feel of playing the guitar, So, but I always feel like it's something that can push me into playing any style. If I can understand a player's perspective, I can then sort of tap in to the magic thing that they're doing
Mm-hmm.
without necessarily just transcribing their lick. Because sometimes that happens with jazz. You'll have bebop 251 progressions, and even if you're doing like altered dominance with whole tone scales. I love doing that stuff. I do. Fully diminished arpeggios. Um, but like being able to just take a musical progression and come up with something that's musical, it takes everything. It's not just music theory, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
just the right gear, right? Like I remember a friend of mine, he went to go see Yngwie Malmsteen, and he was talking about how his guitar tech came out, and he was like, you know, he was basically checking the sound on Yngwie's rig. And my friend was like, he was like, man, if it's going to sound like that, I don't know if I want to stay. And I'm like, oh, come on, man, don't be so, you know. And then when Yngwie came out and he played the guitar, it was like twice as thick,
Right.
like, because some people play lighter. I tend to play heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I could show you my frets right now, and they have to be dressed once again. But like I play pretty heavy just to get more tone, but I play heavier strings. So on my electric, I play 11s, D
Oh yeah.
Markleys.
Sure.
Um, yeah. So, um, But on the gypsy jazz guitar, I have electric guitar strings on it now, but it has a humbucker in it.
Oh,
So
okay.
I can do clean tone gypsy, but then I can basically turn my tube screamer on and just play a solo.
Right.
That's the sort of advantage of using that guitar for some of the Rush stuff that I was
Hmm.
doing. Um, but yeah, I think overall you get to that point where you know that there's something new that you want to start bringing in. Um, and I guess that can change too with the guitar that you pick up. I mean, I know your Taylors always sound great. Mine is a 1987 Taylor 512. It's
Oh,
like an
wow.
old school Taylor. It
Sure.
has a passive pickup in it. It's a transducer. It's the K and K, I think.
Okay.
I think I think I have that right.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that sounds right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Because they went from
yeah,
that
so just
to
just
Fishman,
having
right?
the
Hmm.
yeah, right. I mean, and Fishmans are great. Like any of those pickups that are active are great for just plugging in and playing and doing the acoustic thing. Um, but I've been using my Taylor through my pedal board, and I can play that through two different amps. I'll play it through an acoustic guitar amp, and then I have a Hot Rod Deluxe with a 112 of Fender tube amp. So I
Yeah.
literally play through both of those amps when I do the solo Rush thing, just to give it a different thing. But
Right.
it's always tough, though. The other side of the Gypsy is it's I tune down a half step when I play, when I
Hmm.
do the singer songwriter thing. And a gypsy jazz guitar is not supposed to be nice and balanced like our Taylors. It's
Right.
supposed to kind of sound like crummy
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
little bit.
Tones
So I
thin
can
and
get that
metallic.
that yeah, I can get that Getty bass sound with the bass strings. But the hardest part I think is just having a really good intonation on something that's not supposed to be. So I would love it if Cordoba, the guitar company, the gypsy jazz guitar that I have, I would love it if they made a Brandon Dyke model with like,
There you go.
get that fretboard, just, have some more engineering behind it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy. But as far as stuff like that, I mean, I still read through solo guitar music all the time. I'll bring a Barrios piece out and just play it. And Julia Florida, I like that one a lot.
Hmm.
I mean, in college, I did Un Sueño en la
Oh,
Floresta,
sure.
the big tremolo
Tremolo
piece. I
piece.
did that. I played the whole Bach Lute Suite in E minor. That was quite the experience. 20 minutes. It was
Yes.
insane. Andrew York Sunburst. I did that
Hmm.
one. A couple other good theme and variations of Mozart
Yep. Hmm.
by
And
Soar. So I mean, I'll still go back to pieces like that, and that is the cool advantage of reading music, is where you can just you know um, order a piece of music and just sight read through it and see if you like it, and if not, then move on to something else. So
right.
there is that, though. I think having the other side of expanding, the goals or reaching my goals would be, I definitely do at some point want to do just a more jazz driven, probably more like a jazz funk type of record where there's a band and I'm just playing that side of my playing. Cause I love playing through changes.
Hmm.
Um, and I would say this, if anybody's wanting to play, you know, jazz guitar or even somewhere between blues and jazz, it's really important to memorize your chord spellings. If you can do that, you can play the right note at the right time. It doesn't have to be the same licks as Charlie Parker, or it doesn't necessarily have to be the same licks as Wes Montgomery, um, because they had to develop and they had to sing melodies. And sometimes you'll find that just singing a melody and trying to come up with it, I feel like sometimes, I don't know, you might feel this way too with jazz guitar. Sometimes it's more it it's almost like you're not really truly improvising if you're
You're thinking.
if you're too compositional with what you're playing with these lines. I think of course you are still improvising with what you've learned, but to me, I think the biggest challenge is when I play rhythm for somebody, I'm saying, and I start yelling out chords, if they can play through the changes on the spot, to me, that's improvising, you know?
Yeah.
And so having that goal for me is to always do that. But I feel like I'm at a place where I want to expand and do more uh, lines, do some more lines that are more traditional, right?
Mm.
But there's a cool thing to have that funk element in jazz, kind of like a John Schofield thing,
Yeah.
where you can bend the string. Nobody's gonna, get mad because you bent a string.
Get
You know what I'm
arrested.
saying?
You're under
It's
arrest. What are you bending that string for?
don't bend a string. I think I had a student ask me like, why do some people get uptight about that? I'm like, well, what they really want you to do is bend and know where you're bending. That's really what they're trying to say. If you're bending a note and you know where it's going, man, do it all day long. I
Mhm.
mean, I love David Gilmour, right? Those minor third bends that he does, just
Mhm.
amazing. So yeah, it's endless. I
Mm.
think we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it
So,
really is quite the amazing instrument that way. It's also the
oh
thing.
my
It's like, oh
gosh.
boy, if
Yeah.
you're not careful, it could be overwhelming. So,
Yeah.
but it's exciting too. It's like it's just the thing that part of the journey. It's like, okay,
It is.
where do I want to go this week? And
That's right.
it's
It is part of the journey.
very
It is
much like
part.
jazz. It's about where are you? Where'd
Yep.
you come from, and where are you going? So that's really
Exactly. I
fantastic.
love it for that reason. I think it's just phenomenal.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, pretty amazing. Yeah, that's a great answer. And I guess that brings us to the final question, numero cinco.
do-do-do-do-do.
So, I think again you touched on this a bit as well. So, to kind of round it out, what keeps you playing the guitar?
I got to pay the bills. That's what. I'm just joking.
I thought it would be the chicks,
No,
maybe chicks. No.
I yeah, I know exactly. I think overall, um, I'm gonna say for me, it's just kind of like it's a therapeutic thing. If I can pick up the guitar without an agenda, I love that, and I think that's a huge thing about always being able to pick it up. And I think every guitarist has to have a time where you pick it up and there's not a job involved with it. Like there's not, okay, I'm just going through the songs because I have to, right? You have to have, unfortunately, we all have that time where we're just like, okay, I have to practice this stuff. Like it's part of my paycheck this month. Or it's part of my studies for a teacher, one of your students or one of mine. Um, but more or less, there's something that happens, and you mentioned it earlier, just about getting in the zone and just feeling the vibration of the strings and really you know sort of trying to explore something that you haven't played yet before. And when you sit down and do that, sometimes it's good not to think about theory too much, right? But then maybe you come up with a riff and all of a sudden you have this thing that you've never tried to play in that way on the guitar, but then you're looking for another part, and then you go to theory and you could be like, hey, like this would work with this. And or a lot of times that's what I like to do um, with guitar playing. If I'm not going to change a tuning or something like that, um, it's nice to just take, what would it sound like if I just, like the Coltrane thing, like put two chords together. Let's play a G major seven and a B7 at the same time. You've got all the extensions, you've got all like those
Oh,
crazy notes in there too. Um, or it might be a tapping thing where you're tapping a seventh chord. Another big thing I'm into now is tapping, and I tap with a pick just so I don't mess up my
the
eye
thumbnail.
nail.
Right.
And now you can slide the pick too on the electric guitar because you know where those notes are. You can spontaneously do taps in any key or out of any arpeggio. And when the fingers aren't there, you can literally put the pick underneath it.
Right.
And if you know the fretboard well, you can jump up to notes that are in that scale. And so, like I've had a lot of students say, well, can't you play Eruption note for note? I'm like, no. I'm like, I can teach you the tapping part. I've got it in a magazine. If you want to learn it, I'll walk through with it. Um, but taking the tap from Eddie Van Halen, the technique, and being able to do your thing with it, I think that's where it sort of expands that sort of thing. And to me, that always keeps me playing guitar because I always want to go back to something that's like, well, what am I going to do today? If I'm picking up my electric, I might work on something like that, or I might be doing like, hammer-ons and then slides. Sometimes I'll do like compound meter stuff like 7/8, 5/8, 9/8 tapping riffs where I'm hammering on a lower string and then I'm sliding or tapping on the string above it, the upper adjacent string.
Mm.
Because a lot of times people just tap on the same string. I do that all the time too. But I started to go, why not do a hammer on and then do like on electric guitar where you have some sustain, put either a tap or a slide on the next string up. So just that simple idea of like, I wonder what that would look like.
Mm.
You're in the zone and you're coming up with something, and then before you know it, you have something that you can share on Instagram, right? Like that's pretty much how it works.
Yeah. You make
So
it accessible on your platforms, you know?
yeah, you can make it accessible, and then again, you're not necessarily going to do that on every song on a record, but you can do that. You can put stuff in there on overdubs. I mean, people hear guitar albums all the time, and you hear swells and you hear big, feedback stuff on different tracks and stereo. And I mean, the guitar, if you listen to a Joe Satriani record, I'm sure you remember the first time you heard Flying in a Blue Dream, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when that intro comes in and that
Yeah.
like feedback and it starts off real kind of soft and then it builds up and he's into the solo, it's it's heart, it's all heart. So I just
Exactly.
love that. But the other thing I would say is probably more geared towards songwriting, because when you write songs, you have to pick up that guitar sometimes. um
Yeah.
and sometimes it might be, let's try this idea and see if it's really the guitar part I want. Or for me recently, when I play acoustic versions of my songs, I typically try to take bigger voicings of chords that are open chords rather than just a typical, standard chord.
Right.
Um, so I always like to do those types of open chords that are very easily functioning the way A minor and F and G and C would, or E minor, but they're wider sounding, and you have to know bar chords, and then you have to know how to open those strings up. And
Mm.
what happens if I leave the E string open when I play a G?
Right.
Like, oh, that's a six. Or if I slide it down a whole step and I do the F, now I have an F major 9, because that open, I have the third string open and the first string open.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of uh, experimenting. I think that's what really helps pick up the guitar, because you get into that zone and you really want to experiment because it's going to lead to something good. Um, you know, Man, there's so many other things that I could probably say, but uh, you know, I think it's a joy too when you teach other people. And the good thing about the job is we have to pick up our guitars. It keeps us picking it up. Um, I did have a ukulele student recently. That was kind of fun. Do you
Oh,
play
that's cool.
ukulele,
I
Rob?
do. I have two up back there on my shelf. I have two up there somewhere.
Oh man, that's cool,
It's a
man.
lot of fun.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I
Yeah.
I love ukulele too. I don't play it very often, but I had a student that wanted to learn, um, and they had a lot of fun with it. But like, just having something different, like a
Mhm.
ukulele is a totally different thing. But what did I do? I tuned it like a guitar, like it's in
Right.
drop D or something, right? And
Yeah.
then I created this piece, and it was like all these weird kind of things put together, but it was something that I did spontaneously just by picking it up.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's the case when it comes to guitar. It's like, you know, how do you put it down? I think that's the hardest question,
Right.
for all of us. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I definitely would say, um, if you're starting off with guitar, a good way to keep playing guitar would be that. Like find the time in the day that you pick it up and that you just sit there and just have fun with it too, instead of, because I do think practice is different than playing. Focus practice is focus practice. You're working on
Right.
something specifically, but sometimes picking it up and having inspiration can lead to a focused thing very
Right.
quickly,
Yeah.
because now you go, okay, I found what I was looking for today. Now let's practice what's in my head to make that possible.
Yeah.
So it's tough because I think the two of them are right there and
Yeah.
you're always going to go back to it. But
It's like a fine line between, discipline and enjoyment. It's like you have to walk that line, where,
yes,
because sometimes the word
yep,
practice entails work, and
yeah,
but I like the word focus. That's a good word too, because
mhm,
you're actually playing, but you're in a focused mindset,
yeah,
and like you're trying to achieve a goal, which is sort of that,
yep,
that idea you want to arrive somewhere. And one thing that came up in a past episode was like, saying that, oh, I'm playing and I sound like crap. It's like, well, you're supposed to sound that way,
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
idea. If you sounded great all the time, like, then you would never pick it up. It's like, oh,
That's right.
I just look at the guitar and it sounds amazing. I'm not even playing
Yeah,
it, and it's it can be that too, where you have
that's
to.
right.
It's that thing you want to do. It's that one activity that you must do. It's like part of your. It's like you're part of your DNA. I have to play the
Yep,
instrument. There's no
you
question
said it
about it.
best.
You know. So it's
It
funny.
it is totally that way, man. And like also too, I think too, when you have, you know, when you have bandmates and stuff like that, it can be great. Obviously, sometimes being a solo artist, there's a blessing and a curse because you can call all the shots, right?
Hmm.
But then sometimes the camaraderie is like, okay, I got to drive these cities by myself, and I don't get to play with a bass player and a drummer.
Drummer.
Makes my life a lot easier with those. I mean, I was very spoiled with, um, God rest his soul. Charlie Adams was the drummer of my group CBS project, and we were like a rock trio, progressive rock trio type of thing. But he also made my guitars, Adam Custom Guitars, and he's quite a guitar player, or he was. And so, you know that that's that's just great to have that, uh, camaraderie in a band. If it's the right thing, it can be really cool. And sometimes you have to say, hey, let's practice. Even though we don't have anything on the schedule this month, you know, let's commit to practice, because after the practice is done, we're all like, through the roof, excited
Right.
about what we're doing. and
Yeah, you're related.
and that's the way it should be. I mean, it's all about that, enthusiasm.
Hmm.
If you want to, energy is contagious, if you want to speak
Right.
on a Rush lyric.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's
enthusiasm is the
it's
you
it's
know
it's definitely true,
infected by the
man.
god, as they say.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that interview. That's
Yeah.
a good one. But yeah, I think it just comes down to, you know what are your overall goals with where you're at within the year that you're working with. um because if I have a student that comes to me and says, hey, I really want to get, better at, bending in tune, I'm like, I think that's a great idea, let's start today. um and and that's a difficult thing to start telling a student, to say, well, just feel the tension, eventually you'll just feel the right tension. So I will often just play the whole step up as a note,
Hmm.
and I just keep playing it. And I'm like, just take a couple shots, man. Like pretend I'm a punching bag, and I'm just hitting the pitch that you should bend to.
Right.
And they're doing it, and sometimes they'll overshoot it, but eventually they come back next week and I'm like, all right, I'm doing the same thing. And I'm like, you got it, you know? That's cool.
Yeah.
Um and so anything like that is a way to keep playing. And
Mm.
you know on the flip side of the coin, just say we just so that we play devil's advocate, I guess. I've had students ask me, when do I put the guitar down? That's got to be different for everybody, but I would
Hmm.
say, like, if you have people in your life that are actively saying, hey, let's go to dinner, and you're still, for me, I would be drooling all over myself or whatever. um if you got it, sometimes you got to put it down as well.
Hmm.
And how do you know when to do that? And that's different for everybody because of their situation. I mean, if
Hmm.
I mean, living alone is endless amounts of practice, but also that's not as fun either.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, man, I mean, I know that the list goes on and on when it comes to what can keep you playing. But I would think for most of us, it's that love for it, it's that
Mm.
passion, and it's that the ear side of that we want to hear something, and we want to be the ones, like you said earlier, creating it. So
Yeah.
pretty cool, man.
Yeah. It's wild, totally
Yeah.
so wild. And it kind of gives you back to, it's like a nice full circle where,
Yep.
the goal is the reason why you started playing in the first place. Whatever that goal is, that's the reason like, you landed
Yep.
on this crazy instrument called the guitar.
Yeah.
And for me it wasn't first choice. It was drums, but then
Oh no,
I made my way into the guitar from
I
playing
gotcha.
saxophone, mentioning, the Kiss thing before. It's I mean, you could probably
Well,
play Love Gun on the saxophone. You could probably make it work. They tune down, so
you could, you
but
could.
at the time, like, this sounds dopey. I'm not gonna, I can't. So it's just funny 'cause that was a goal. Like, I heard
Uh-huh.
this stuff. I'm like, oh, we just try playing, any Kiss song on saxophone. And I'm like,
Yep.
I'm sure somebody out there on YouTube or wherever has done it, or maybe not. But that was a goal I had. And then it's like, no,
That's awesome.
this is not working for me, And I didn't know about
Uh-huh.
jazz, at the time. I was too young, even though I was told about it.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah, but
funny
that's
how that
cool.
works. Yeah.
That's cool that you played sax too.
Yeah, it's
You
fun.
know, that how does that for I mean, for jazz sake, I would think that having the vocabulary would be very, very crucial for improv. Um, but do you feel like as a sax player, you could, you know, if somebody was like, here's the chord changes, whether it be a piano player or a guitarist, do you feel like you got to the point where you could improvise over that chord, the progression? Um, did you use mostly typical major scale, minor scale modes, or did you tend to think, here's the arpeggio of the chord? I mean, there's probably all of those, but as a sax player, the approach to jazz might be might be different because of the instrument, like, and
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
those are always questions I have.
I didn't go too deeply into jazz.
Gotcha.
I was working at the Rubank book at the time, so you had like all
Oh,
these
nice.
different playing a lot of band music, like band competitions and things like that.
Yeah,
TV show themes we were
love
doing.
that.
Yeah, then it became marching band in high school, which by that time I was playing tenor drum. So, but I never
Cool.
got that deep into it.
Yeah.
I still have my saxophone books, which I can pull
Uh-huh.
out for guitar stuff, and work
Sweet.
through that. So, I never really kind of made that connection with that instrument to there's jazz. I can go in there and do that. And in fact, on my episode, I mentioned Sonny Rollins, that
Yeah.
album, Saxophone Colossus, which was like a double or triple album set, and checking it out, and I couldn't make anything out of it at the time, but it was really cool to hear like something different. And so then the goal became, I'm going to take up guitar. It wasn't like a turn
Nice.
off, but that
Right.
was my bridging moment. Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
explore guitar. I'm starting to discover all this rock music, so maybe I should go into play guitar. So the goal changed from being involved with
Yeah.
alto and tenor sax into like, I'm gonna go with guitar. I'm really interested in checking what that's about. And
That's
then getting
awesome.
my first guitar was also a Bentley. It was a Series 10.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
Oh, that's funny.
had the shark fin inlays and had the Jackson
Yes.
like headstock and whatnot.
Nice.
And I put a Floyd Rose on it. So my
Cool.
first real guitar that I bought was a Series 10 by Bentley. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's pretty wild.
That's funny. We had the same opening guitars. That's
Yeah,
so cool.
I bought
That's
that
awesome. You're
myself.
a
I
great
actually,
guitar player too, man. I
oh, you
love your
too.
videos and stuff. It's so cool.
Yeah.
And I always appreciate how clean you are, you know.
Oh, thanks.
Just, you know, there's something to be said. Like you could be a good session player too, because well, you do record your music too, don't you?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I have a theory that sometimes when you do record your own music, you start to pick up on subconsciously being a session player because you are also hearing that part and trying to mix it and everything. So
Mhm.
any little string that's still ringing or whatever, or you get more critical of it because it's under the microscope of the what you're recording, you know.
Yeah.
And so I do appreciate your very clean player, man. So
Oh, you as
good
well. I mean,
stuff.
from all
Oh,
the videos
thanks.
I've seen, from what your
Yeah,
own stuff, the Rush covers. I mean,
yeah.
there's you can tell there's a
Thank
focus
you.
on
I
like this
appreciate
has to
that.
be presented in a certain way, and it's got to sound a certain way, and to get your point across musically. So it's I
I
appreciate
appreciate
that a
that.
lot.
That means the world, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But I know if you played the saxophone, you'd be like John Cusack on Better Off Dead, right? You can kind
Yeah,
of do
probably.
that.
That's probably what I be if I go back to it. You know, my mouth's
Yeah.
completely out of shape, but yeah, that's probably
I
what would
want my
happen.
$2. I love that
Yeah,
movie.
it
Such a good movie. It's
is.
so cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome, man. Well,
amazing.
it's been a fun time this evening. I appreciate you
Yes,
letting me talk. That was awesome.
absolutely. Well, that's what it's all about here. You know, it's like sharing your
Yeah, man.
story, and you know, from conception to present day. You know,
Yeah.
it's really important for people to hear. And again, that connectability is really the end game, and we all
Yep.
have these commonalities. So it's a matter of like
Uh-huh.
seeing that in someone like yourself. Like, yeah, I did that same trip. You know, and I'm at
Yeah.
that same point, whether you're just playing for playing or you're you know teaching for a living,
Yeah.
like me and Brandon are. The the story kind of it does present some commonality with all of us. You know what we're trying to do
Mhm.
as players in this topsy turvy music world that we're in, and just the fact that we can do it in a way now, which is something that came up recently as well, is that the ability we can share things so much more easily, and you know put it out there for everybody to check out and consume and enjoy. You know, fingers crossed is amazing. We're in this amazing time, and it's just getting better and better in terms of you know what you can put out to people and how they
Mhm.
receive it. It's such a we didn't have this you know 20, 30 years ago. You know, it's there's an
I
assumption
know.
that it's always been there. You know, especially with a lot of
Yep.
younger players coming up. There was a time
I
where this wasn't the case. You know, and the fact that we can sit and communicate you know across many states you know
I
in
know.
this
I mean, I'm in
format
South
is
Carolina.
amazing. Yeah. So, but I'm
That's so cool.
very happy that you were able to, you know, to be on this episode. I think it's an important
Oh man,
episode.
it's my pleasure. I've had a great time tonight. I mean, this show's going to take off just because it's all about the camaraderie, you know? It's like all of us, it's like we do this thing that we love. We could all be playing out of the same scale or arpeggio at the same time, but we'd sound totally different.
Hmm.
And I love that aspect of guitar playing. And so I look at guitar players like it's a camaraderie. There's really never a competition between us because it's just like, oh man, I never thought about that. That's cool. And
Hmm.
then vice versa. It's just endless, like you said before.
Yeah,
So
it's
pretty cool.
pretty cool indeed. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, amazing stuff. I thank you so much. I have so much gratitude that you're able to be here and share this with everybody. I think it's an
It's my
important.
pleasure, man. And it was a great night. A lot of good conversation. So,
Very cool.
yeah, keep it going, man. Try to get anybody that would love to be here on it, you know.
Yeah,
I'll spread the word, of course, as well.
sweet. As I will with all your stuff that you mentioned tonight. We'll put it in the
Yeah, I
description. I
appreciate it.
mention it yet again. It's an important thing for you guys to all and you know go visit Brandon. Everything he's doing, you know, it's all there on his YouTube channel, and I think you have a topic page as well, right, with your music.
I do. Yeah, there's a
Yes.
YouTube topic channel that you can hear full songs and stuff from my distributor TuneCore.
Nice.
So,
Nice. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
very
I'll
cool,
include that for
man.
you guys, and you can all check it out. And on that note, no pun intended, we shall wrap up this episode. And thank you all for being here. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you want to be on an episode of Guitar Journeys, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the description as well. You can message me, and we'll set something up and get you on here to share your story, your journey. Thank you so much,
That's right.
everybody.
Goodbye,
Appreciate it.
everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Brandon, so much. And
Absolutely.
we'll talk to you guys all soon. See you later.
Cheers.
Cheers.